All right, we are live. Took a while to get that set up, but we are good to go. So, welcome everybody. Today I'm just going to be sharing a little bit of a vision that I had last night because we're entering into a new season. This is the weekend of Rosh Ha-Shana, which is the beginning of the Hebrew New Year, the civil New Year, and we're really entering into an unprecedented time. So there's a little bit of a deep dive that I'm going to be sharing with you as well when it comes to the ancient scriptures. But before we begin, we got to acknowledge source. So right now, source, allow you to flow through me to get the right words through to the audience, and that we all learn what it is that we need to do in these trying times, because these times are unprecedented, and you're showing us and guiding us by inner inspiration how you want us to move forward, because you are raising up an army, you are raising up a new era of light beings that are here to bring forth your power and your glory. So we just thank you, and we ask for your blessing upon this word and upon this teaching. Thank you, Lord. So we are beginning with what was revealed to me in a vision last night. Intense times. Like, literally, this is coinciding with what Alberta has recently just reinstituted the mandates, which is no big surprise. They said that, we're open for the summer, but we all knew that this was coming. And it's just like we don't know what it is that we need to do, but we're just kind of stuck in this time warp, and we're watching everything kind of unfold in an unprecedented manner. Literally, like, nothing preceding this time has ever happened before like it is now. I don't know if I said that right, but literally, we're just doing things like just blind, because we haven't been through this kind of season ever in our history. Like, sure, there have been other places and other timelines, I guess you could say, that have experienced this, but for ourselves, we're going through this anew. So first things first, I'm just going to start with this vision. It was really intense, because it was like we were all just a group of people huddled together in like this building, and we were all just kind of waiting out, because inside this building we were safe, but outside of this building it was like a literal war zone, and we were just stuck in this building and just kind of just waiting it out. That's all I can describe it as. But there was anxiety, there was people were scared, and they were discussing, but we just didn't know what to do. All we knew to do was just to wait it out till whatever was going on outside calmed down. And eventually it got to a point where, we thought what was going on outside was just getting through, and we were getting ready to leave the building. And all of a sudden, someone comes from the front door and says, "You guys, we can't leave the building. We gotta stay. We gotta stay locked down some more." Because the war, they said they were letting off, but it's just intensifying. So once this message got throughout the whole crowd, we all just kind of started waiting it out again, and just kind of like, it wasn't like a church service. It wasn't like anybody was praying or teaching or singing or none of that, but everybody in the room was just gravitating to tap in to whatever like source was beaming through their own hearts, and trying to make sense of the situation on an individual level. And while we were all kind of locked down in this situation, uh, a group of people came through the door, and they were like stragglers. They were kind of unkempt, not like completely haggard, but they were basically, they'd been through the war. They were coming in, and they're like, "Oh, is it too late for us to join you?" And we're like, "No, not at all. Find a place, sit down. We're gonna wait it out. It's safe in here." And once this group assimilated with our congregation, I guess you can say, the news came in that it was safe to go outside. And this time it was safe to go outside. And then I awoke, and Source was telling me, like, even though it looks like there's this last kind of chokehold on society, this is just the last wave, because from this restriction, the last of the last people that have dedicated themselves and finally realized to turn to truth, they're going to come through, and they're going to realize just where the truth was hiding all along. Once they turn and they make that decision, everything's going to be changed from a supernatural level. It's not going to happen on the physical level because, like I said, here, especially in Canada, the politics is completely. I got to be careful of what I say here, but it's completely manipulated to fall in favor of those whom, well, let's just say the monsters that are in charge. These things are set. They have the worst case scenarios already set out. The play is already in their books. But the only thing that can cut them down is when people turn to Source and really acknowledge what's going on in the deeper level. And from there, we can actually allow Source to turn the page on them. That's what's going to change this story. And that's coming because the last wave of truth seekers, like, they might have given in to the narrative, they might have bought into all that kind of stuff, but you know what? They're coming through. They're coming through, and this game's just about to bust wide open. But yeah, that was the vision. So just stay strong, especially anybody in Canada, especially if you're in Alberta, in the Calgary area. Just know that this is only temporary, and this pressure is only being applied to get the people that are the last of the last wave, who are gonna turn to truth, because people have bought in, and they're in denial. There's so many people that are just in denial, in cognitive dissonance, and they don't want to admit that they've been duped by the government. Like, honestly, the government, like, if you've never trusted them before, what makes you think that they're trustworthy now? Right? But that was the vision. And so I just want to share a couple verses from the Oracle of Joel, which is my favorite oracle because, well, quite frankly, that's my name. But yeah, it begins, the word of Yahweh that came to Joel, the son of Petuel. Hear this, you old men, and give ear, all you inhabitants of the land. Has this been in your days, or even in the days of your fathers? Like, it's literally saying, has this ever happened before? And it's talking to the old men, the elders of the land. Has this been in your days, or even in the days of your fathers? This is such a big event in society that, it says, tell your children of it, and let your children tell their children, and their children another generation. And when we look around, what do we see? That which the palmer worm has left has the locust eaten. Now, literal interpretation aside, we can, like I said, I got to be careful of what I say here. But, it's like what the muzzle has left, the shot has eaten. And it goes on, and that which the locusts have left has the cankerworm eaten, or maybe the passport, all these things. And that which the cankerworm has left has the caterpillar eaten. So literally, we're mentally and emotionally and physically decimated. We've been drained by this gauntlet of just misinformation, manipulation, and mind control, really. Awake, you drunkards, and weep, and howl, all you drinkers of wine, because of the new wine, for it is cut off from your mouth. So it's talking about, like, just how everything that we've had as comforts are taken away. And the funny thing is, now in Alberta, they're actually pushing that all restaurants, all bars stop serving alcohol after 10 o'clock. And you know what the next step that they have in mind after that is, there's going to be curfews after that. So this is all a part of a plan. And it's not to say, just the drink that we've had as comforts has been taken away. It's literally on another level. This is the inspiration that comes through from the spiritual side of things, the new wine. And you know what? When we look at churches all around and we look at these institutions, they're completely uh, they don't even have it. They don't even have it. And now that the state is deeming these services unessential, it's really being cut off from the people, and we're waking up too late to realize that we don't have this anymore to our benefit. And like I said, this tightening, these restrictions are coming on like never before. But Source does have the upper hand. But the only way Source can actually do anything is through us that are allowing Source to come through into the physical world. So we are literally the hands and feet and the body of Source that can actually bring to pass these changes to, whatever manipulation, whatever evil is out there. We are the ones that will bring this change about. Because if you just read through chapter 1 of the Oracle of Joel, it literally is saying how bad things are. He says, for a nation is come up upon my land, strong and without number. We won't talk about what nation that is, but I think it's pretty obvious to those of us with discernment. Everything is barren. He has laid my vine waste and barked my fig tree. He has made it clean bare and cast it away. The branches thereof are made white. And that also symbolizes everything. It's just a parallel. It's a parallel. Yes, this is talking about this historical locust infestation that decimated the land. And then an army came in, and literally this is something that never was experienced before, and a decimation of society like never before. And that is parallel to what we're experiencing now. But look at the solution that the prophet Joel is given. Sanctify a fast, call a solemn assembly, gather the elders and all the inhabitants of the land into the house of Yahweh your God, and cry unto Yahweh. So when these restrictions come so tight, and they take away everything that society had accumulated for itself, a lot of times society just says, it reaches that point where it's like, Source, we don't really care, because we have all this prosperity, we have all these resources. Why do we need God anymore? But when the tightenings, the persecution, the restrictions, all this kind of oppression comes on the people, where do they turn to? They start to turn for higher and deeper answers, because they realize that, nothing physical is going to break through these kind of problems. He goes on to say, blow the trumpet in Zion and sound an alarm in my holy mountain. And it's interesting that this should all happen at this time, because it is the weekend of Rosh Ha-Shana, which is the sounding of the trumpet, or Yom Teruah, the blast, the day of the blast, the call of war. That is what is literally embodied in this time. And it's a time of just renewing all kind of civic contracts. And we're going to see that actually play out. And another thing I want to say is that the evil people that have instituted these kinds of restrictions, once again, they said that Alberta was going to be open for the summer. And yeah, basically summer is over, but it's not quite over until after Labor Day. Why didn't they wait until after Labor Day? Well, Source told me this one thing. And Source said they are not opening after Labor Day because they can't afford to wait. They have to rush this thing because they know their time is short. And quite frankly, the day before they decided in City Hall on reinstating these mandates, they actually had a huge protest across the country with all the healthcare workers. And the turnout was more than I expected, honestly, because I have family that works in the hospital, and you don't realize that so many people are out there and, just against these kind of mandates. If it was a choice, if it was for the better of society, it's one thing. But when the government makes it mandatory or else, people are going to rise up. And now that the restrictions are even tighter, people are not happy. People are not happy. So I tell you this, continuing on the first verse of the second chapter, it says, "Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of Yahweh comes, for it is nigh at hand." And the day of Yahweh literally means that the harvest that you've sown for is coming up against you. And what has this cabal sown for? What are the seeds that they've planted over generations after generations? It's coming up before their face. And we're facing the year of Jubilees right now. The day of Yahweh is like a day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness, as the morning spread upon the mountains. So it's talking about just the darkness and literally the thick judgment that's coming down. It's like an axe to the neck of these people. And maybe literally, I don't want to go there, but what I'm saying is there's a whole lot of things that are exposed and being exposed through this time of pressure that everybody is being subjected to. And we can't afford to be complicit, or we can't afford to even, just play it safe. We have to get ready for what's coming next, because when all of this shifts and all of this turns, and you can mark my words on this, when all of this shifts, we are going to be at the forefront in order to carry a new paradigm forward. So we got to get ready for that. But what is the catalyst that's going to shift this whole thing? Joel says further in the second chapter, "Therefore also now, says Yahweh," Joel speaking the words of Yahweh, "turn you even to me with all your heart, and with fasting, and with weeping, and with mourning, and rend your heart and not your garments, and turn unto Yahweh your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and of great kindness, and repent him of the evil." So, we see that also in our time, because we're wondering, like, why isn't judgment coming on these people when, it's so obvious what they deserve? But it says that Yahweh is gracious and merciful, slow to anger. And I know a lot of academics make him out to be like a very wrathful deity. But when you actually read through the actual text, you realize that he's much more merciful and just trying to get people to wake up, and taking as long as he can before judgment actually comes down, before any kind of final blow is delivered. It just takes so long because he's hoping that people will actually wake up and really realize just what's been going on, what they've been doing, and give them an opportunity to change. So those of us that are changing, those of us that actually have the opportunity to look at things and reassess maybe our life's trajectory, we can actually turn and acknowledge, maybe the seeds that we've planted in the last few years of our life, maybe all our life, maybe those aren't quite the harvest that we want to reap for ourselves. But there's still time to change. And the politicians, the pundits in the media, the talking heads, they've all been given warnings from the prophets. And yet, They're just so stubborn. They're just so stubborn. But the time is still there for them. And like in my vision that I saw, there's still that last wave that needs to come in. Source is just waiting for that last wave to come in. And once that happens, something's going to give in the spiritual realm. And once it does, we're going to see transformation like never before. We're going to see transformation like never before. Literally entering into a new paradigm, like I said, Earth 2.0. He goes on to say, blow the trumpet in Zion, sanctify a fast, call a solemn assembly. Gather the people, sanctify the congregation, assemble the elders, gather the children and those that suck the breasts. Let the bridegroom go forth of his chamber and the bride out of her closet. Literally calling all members of society. Nobody is, out of this. Nobody is exempt from responsibility because we're all each individually responsible for the life that we create and experience for ourselves. Let the priests, the ministers of Yahweh, weep between the porch and the altar, and let them say, spare your people, O Yahweh, and give not your heritage to reproach, that the heathen should rule over them. Wherefore should they say among the people, where is their God? So the priests are the intercessors, and those are some people that do stand in the gap for society, that know better, and that realize, maybe we don't want things to go the way they have been going. We don't want to reap the harvest that is due based on certain actions of some individuals in society. So there are individuals like that set up to bring that kind of action, those actions that society has committed before the judgment of Source, and actually repent for it and say, you know what, no more. We're not standing behind this, and we let it go. We let it go. There are those kind of people, and when we turn with sincerity to divine Source, when we literally make sure that we're not entertaining anything that's less than communion with the divine, then we're actually going to enter into a new era of mercy, because it says, then will Yahweh be jealous for his land and pity his people. See, these people sowed seeds. They didn't even care for Yahweh. They even completely let that kind of religion fall to the wayside. They entertained other idols, literally, because when you put a definition on Source, you limit Source, and that's exactly what Yahweh didn't want, because the name Yahweh literally means he who is and continues in existence, who was and is to come. Once you put a definition on isness and say, oh, this deity represents, fertility, or this deity represents generation, or this deity represents, whatever natures, or Necheru, like it was in ancient Egypt. When we're talking about those, we're just limiting Source. And you know what? Source is infinite. We're not limiting Creator Source, but we're limiting our experience of how Source can manifest in and through our lives. And that's what's blasphemy, because we just cut ourselves off from that infinite potential, that connection with the divine, Ein Sof, limitless. Ein Sof, our limitless light. But when we do this and we literally turn to Source as our answer, as our security, and as our restitution, it says, Yahweh will answer and say unto his people, behold, I will send you corn and wine and oil, and you shall be satisfied therewith, and I will no more make you a reproach among the heathen. Now, corn, wine, and oil can be taken in the literal sense, so you get grain, and then you get a good harvest of grapes, so you get your wine. And then, of course, oil is from the olives, and that also represents another system that's in the system of harvest. But it can also mean things on a deeper level, because corn represents grain, which is turned to bread. The word corn, actually, it's not talking about maize. It's talking about grain. This is the authorized version, but the word actually refers to grain because maize was completely unknown in England in the 1600s anyway. That grain is turned to bread, and bread is the living bread, which is the living word. Wine represents, of course, the blood, and oil represents the anointing. So it can be talking about these things on a deeper spiritual level, and it can also be talking about processes in the body as well, where wine represents the blood and oil represents Christos, corn represents actual physical food. So these are different manifestations of how fulfillment, shalom, is reinstituted. He goes on to say, "Fear not, land, be glad and rejoice, for Yahweh will do great things. Be not afraid, you beasts of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness do spring, for the tree bears her fruit, the fig tree and the vine do yield their strength. Be glad then, children of Zion, and rejoice in Yahweh your God, for he has given you the former rain moderately, and he will cause to come down for you the rain, the former rain and the latter rain in the first month." Now, of course, the rain is a symbol of abundance and rejuvenation from heaven, literally watering the earth, the dry earth, and making it bear crops again. But the word here in Hebrew for former rain, it can also mean teacher. Moderately is based on the actual Hebrew word tzadek, which literally means righteous. So in the Qumran caves, you have the scrolls that actually talk about the teacher of righteousness. This is paralleled with the Nazarene, Jesus Christ. And after that, former rain, or teacher of righteousness, comes the latter rain in the first month. That word can also refer to the Holy Spirit, the outpouring of the first month. It just says the primary. It can mean the primary month, but that is also like the chiefest or the most eminent, the top of the top. That is literally what the word means in Hebrew. And it's talking about the outpouring, that the second outpouring is even more than the first outpouring. These are all different levels at which they mean, but in applying them in our present day, we can see that even though the restrictions were lifted moderately the first time, what comes after that is just going to be on a completely different scale and just take everything to a whole new level. He goes on to say, "And the floors shall be full of wheat, and the vats shall overflow with wine and oil." There again, we have the grain, the wine, and the oil. "And I will restore to you the years that the locust has eaten, the cankerworm and the caterpillar and the palmer worm, my great army which I sent among you." Now, what's interesting there is that he says, "I will restore the years that they have eaten." He doesn't just say, "I'm going to give you food again." He said that also, but he doesn't just mean you're going to get your grain back. He said the years that you've lost to this decimation are going to be restored to you, kind of like the years of Job. I'm going to be getting into that in another episode. I still have to prepare a few notes on that one. But when the years are restored, it's talking about, the lockdown. It's talking about, you've lost like 18 months now. That is going to be restored. And we're going to see dancing in the streets. We're going to be singing like never before. Eating cake. Guys, I hope you're eating cake already, because we are literally, this is a done deal. And for those of us that are already tuned in, that have already allowed the living logos to manifest through us and live our lives, we're dead to our egos. It's the living word that actually lives through us. It's a done deal. And people ask me all the time, like, when are these miracles going to come out? When are we going to start to see them? When are we going to start experiencing the glory? And I'm like, man, I've been experiencing it now the last month or two. It's already a done deal for me. It's already happening. Like I'm meeting with people and I'm connecting. Now we have like different groups that we're actually going out in the streets, and things are just shifted. Like I never thought this would ever happen. I never thought this would ever happen. And now it's like a real shift. A real shift has happened, and I'm living almost a completely different life from a couple months ago. Definitely, definitely a different life than I was last year this time. Definitely. So that's what I have to say. When we tap in, it's already a done deal. It's already a done deal. It's already happening in my life. The words of Joel also go on to say that you shall eat in plenty. Talking about the restitution here. When that happens, you shall eat in plenty. The Hebrew word is literally eat to eat. You eat devouringly. Hebrew it's like a double intensive. That's why you can't really translate many of these things, because the nuances are in the original language, and Hebrew is not like Greek. I mean, you can't translate the Greek scriptures either, but Hebrew is, it's so poetic, and especially the oracles, especially these prophecies, the words are chosen like 7 times over by source, and there is no playing games when it comes to the words being used. So you will eat to eat for the sake of eating. You're going to eat just to enjoy eating. You are eating in plenty, and you are satisfied, and you praise the name or the system or the government or the authority of Yahweh your God. Yahweh literally embodies that cyclical justice, the infinite circle of isness, which embodies seed time and harvest. And what they've put out, they're getting back. And he's talking here about harvests being restored. Whatever the locust and the palmer worm, caterpillar, or cankerworm have eaten, new grain, new wheat, new oil, new wine. He said at the beginning the wine is cut off, and the new wine, it's all restored. It's all restored, but the catalyst that restores it all is that inner seeking. Like in my vision, we all sat individually seeking our own heart space to see what source was telling each of us. There was no teaching, no, worship service, none of that. And it was kind of like our church building, kind of like that. But it wasn't church service. Each one of us was having church in our own hearts. So when this is all restored, we eat devouringly. We're satisfied. We're satisfied. And we praise the name of Yahweh our God, who has dealt wondrously with you. And my people shall never be ashamed. Now take note of that phrase, because that word literally means to be embarrassed. The shame is to be embarrassed because of other people looking at you. And right now, it looks like some people are just really getting into their own minds, their own paradigms, and like I said, cognitive dissonance. They're looking at us who are awake, truthers, those of us that see through the illusion, and they're saying like, you know what, you're wrong. And it's shameful because they won't even listen to the words that we're telling them. But this is the promise. My people shall never be ashamed. And then he goes on and says, you shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am Yahweh your God, and none else. And then he repeats it, and my people shall never be ashamed. Now when source repeats something, you better pay attention, because that is what this is all tied into. And that ends the 2nd chapter in the Hebrew version. The English translations merge the next little bit into the same chapter. But we can see that that is the crux. And he's saying that source, Yahweh, is saying that I am in the midst of Israel, and you will know that I am Yahweh your God. And that is what is coming down to. Like no man, no institution, no organization is going to save us, but divine source, creator himself. No question about it. This is why the intensity of the restrictions is coming to a head, is because all of that is really exposing the true nature of the corruption and the manipulation, the mind control on the public, on the sheeple. And really, you know what? It's not even about being cattle anymore, because cattle, at least you can raise and use and, sell. Literally, they're just thinking of us as insects. And, when the swarm of locusts come in, what do? You exterminate them. That is the agenda that is going on. I won't get into the details on how that's being applied with the jab and all that stuff, but literally it's planned genocide. Let's leave it at that. But the promise that ends chapter 2, and I'm going to finish here. There's a lot in chapter 3 that I can cover, and I'm just browsing over this because there's so much wealth in these things. And if I was to go into detail, like we could be here all day. But that's why I'm starting this series, is because I am going to just start talking all this stuff and really beaming it through, because the time to wake up, it's upon us. And this is a wake up call, and that's why he's saying, blow the trumpet. This is the festival of Rosh Ha-Shana, and this is the time of the outpouring. And that's what he says here in verse 28 in the English version. This is the beginning of chapter 3 in the Hebrew. But it says, it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. Not just humanity, because when it says all flesh, that's talking about all creatures. So this is a very interesting nuance here. And when you read other sections like Habakkuk 2, he says that the whole earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of Yahweh, as the waters cover the sea. Not as the seas cover the earth, literally as the waters cover the sea. The sea is water. But what this is going to look like, your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions. And also upon the servants and upon the handmaids in those days will I pour out my spirit. Literally every tier of society is going to be tapped into this communication from source. Zechariah also says the same thing, that every man shall be a prophet. And if someone says, I'm prophesying to another, it's not going to be nice for them. But this is the time of an outpouring and a change in paradigm, because he also says, I will show wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. A lot of people say that refers to volcanic eruptions. I know over the winter 2020, 2021, there were a lot of volcanic eruptions. This is the whole time that we're living in through this outpouring, and the outpouring of the Spirit has already begun. It's not going to happen once the restrictions are lifted. It's already begun, and it's accelerating. It's accelerating. People are waking up to the power of the Spirit like never before. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and the terrible day of Yahweh come. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of Yahweh shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as Yahweh has said, and in the remnant whom Yahweh shall call. So this is the whole crux of the issue. When you get right with source, when you call on that power of Yahweh, like I said, Yahweh is he who is and was and will be forever in eternity. And that cyclical justice embodied in that infinite circle is seed time and harvest. When you call on that authority, you're delivered, because you realize the seeds that I sow are going to come back to me. Once you step in and get in line and get right with source, that is deliverance. And there's more to this. The next chapter deals with actual prophecy, when literally the governments of the world are reset. reset. Maybe we'll get into that in the next episode. I don't know. Leave a comment if you like, because there's a few other things that I do want to touch on. Like, I do want to do a deep dive into Job. I do want to do a really deep dive into the book of the Apocalypse, and actually all the prophecies, because I have that prophetic anointing, so it's very easy for me to receive downloads from source into how to apply these practically into our present day. But you know what? We could take this anyway forward, whatever source guides me, and however people actually are willing to implement. That's what it comes down to, implementing these revelations into your own life in order to carry out what they're trying to bring to pass. And what it's trying to bring to pass is this last little bit, you know, the restitution of the years that have been lost to whatever decimation society has faced, the restitution of, you know, the harvest, the grain, the oil, the wine, the restitution of all of that, and to understand that source is the source of all of this. Our egos can never get to that point where we can actually make these changes happen in the physical. Sure, we can choose a better outcome, but we can't see beyond the choices that we have to make. And we can't see what other people are choosing. We can't line other people up. We can't line other circumstances up. You know, we can barely line up the weather. That's another issue. But we are entering into a new era, and that is what we are doing today with the Feast of Trumpets. So I'm going to be sounding the shofar, proclaiming the new era, and this is also proclaiming war on the kingdom of darkness, because the kingdom of darkness cannot stand when the light shines. And yeah, the light has been hid under a bushel for a while. You know, people have become complacent. They've been fed by Big Brother. They've been fed Soma, if you understand the reference to Brave New World, 1984. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about us rising up and being the light of the world. Put the candlestick up on the wall and be like the city on a hill, that nobody can not see it. Nobody can not know where that city is, because it's up on a hill and it cannot be hidden. It's not in a valley somewhere. It's not behind a mountain. It's right up in plain sight. And that is what the kingdom of darkness is really facing, because we are rising up. So, to sound the alarm, blow the trumpet in Zion. Wake up the sleeping giant, because we are lions and we're waking up and we're reclaiming our sovereignty and we're stepping into a new paradigm. We are the catalyst, and we are going to be the hands and the feet and the minds and the voices that are bringing this new paradigm forward. Kingdom of darkness is already done. It's already done. It's just a matter of declaring checkmate, because there's still a few moves left on the chessboard. But we already know. Checkmate is already done. It's like when you're moving those rooks or the queen forward, and the king has to move all the way back to the back of the board, and one by one you're moving those rooks forward. That's an easy checkmate, but you know what? You know. The guy knows, the other side knows, it's over. It's over. And that's why they had to rush this whole thing before Labor Day, because they saw the turnout for the protests with the health services here. I was shocked. And I know, it's like Eliyahu said, you know, Lord, I'm alone. I'm alone here, and they want to kill me. They want to kill me. I'm the only prophet left. And he said, no, there's 7,000 others that have not bowed the knee to Baal. And that's what was exposed that day of the protest all throughout Calgary. Canada. Calgary had a protest here. Foothills Hospital. And Derek Sloan was here. If you don't know Canadian politics, Derek Sloan is a big voice for truth and liberty and justice. And he tried to get a political party in months ago. And normally the process doesn't take more than a few weeks, like 2 months at the most. But he applied in spring, didn't get his political party in. So it's obvious who's running the shots. You know, we don't need that anymore. We don't need Adolf Hitler. We don't need Benito Mussolini. We don't need Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, or Fidel Castro. We don't need a Fidel Castro here in Canada. I think some of you might know what I mean by that, but let's not get into all that stuff. We just know where we're going, where source is leading us, and from there we can literally be who we've come here to be. That's what it's all about. Being who we've come here to be, and not letting any institution, government, or religion stand in the way of that. So I'm going to sound the shofar now in commemoration of a new year, a new era, and a new time. Shalom.